To tell about myself, I'm Sharmila from iTeLearn, and I'm basically a mobile automation tester with more than 5 years of experience in automating applications using Appium, Selenium, and Java. And in addition to that, I've also involved in automating SOAP UI web services and been part of the manual testing team as well. Moreover, I've also, trained students or employees in my organizations in order to help them increase or enhance their automation skills. So that's much about myself. Looking forward to work with you on this platform. Uh, Again, welcome you all.
So team, I am going to launch a poll. I hope you are able to see it on your screen. I request you to start responding to it. We will just give it 10 seconds or maybe 20, 50 seconds. People, please start responding to it. Yeah. Team, I see 72% people have voted for it. So can everyone please vote in so that I can close this poll? Okay, I'll give it 5 seconds more and we'll close this poll, team. Team, can everyone please respond to the poll? Okay, we are good. I would be closing the poll now. Okay, team, I hope you can see the results on your screen. I am sharing the results on the screen. So, give me 1 second. Okay, so team, as you see, there are 4% audience here who is absolute beginners, and there are 8% people who are have some IT knowledge, and there are 16% people who are IT trained. And the best part is 64% of people here are already working in IT, and 8% are IT experts. So that's a good situation. Yeah, that's a great thing. So Sharmila, do you see this is the audience?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, team, will go ahead. I'll close this. I'm going to hide this, and we'll go ahead with the next poll question. All right. So I'm launching the next poll question, team, which is about which country do you reside in. So if there's no country specifically mentioned, so I request you to go for the option other. Team, we can quickly close this if everyone can vote in. So I think we are good. I will close this poll and share the results. Okay. So major of the audience here is from India and South Asia, that is 63%. We have 22% from US, Canada, and 11% from UK and Europe, and 4% from others. I think it's not a right time for Australia and New Zealand people. There's 0% people. But let's see. We do have a repeat session also, so we may get more people. Okay, team. So one last poll question, and then we are good to go ahead with the session. Just give me 1 minute. Yeah. So team, this is the last poll question for now. Please start responding to it.
What's the question here actually? Do you have any knowledge on Java? Okay. Okay. Thanks, Ashana. I can see that 50% are having some basic knowledge on Java, and 25% they don't have much knowledge on Java. Okay. Hello.
Yes, I can hear you, Sharmila. So yeah, we are done with the polls, and you can go ahead with the presentation.
Okay, sure. Okay, team. So this is the very first session. So I would like to give you some insights about mobile testing before switching over to the actual course contents. So let's first understand why do we need to learn mobile automation testing. You know that nowadays people start using mobile for each and every activity, right? Like shopping or banking, reserving a ticket, maybe a flight ticket or train ticket, communicating through messengers, sharing educational resources, and then attending an online meeting. So I'm sure like maybe 10% of you would be attending this meeting through mobile device. So that's how the increase in usage of mobile devices in today's trend. So this increase in its usage has surpassed over the last few years. So therefore, you see a calculation of how the mobile device increase has reflected in today's market. Here you can see the percentage of users switch to smartphones is about 80%, and the percentage of users using laptop or desktop is 20 to 30%. Okay, and I have another survey wherein it tells me how internet usage is subscribed to smartphones and laptops. And here you can see there is an enormous increase of usage in smartphones when compared to the laptops or mobile desktops in the last 6 to 7 years. So from here, what are we trying to understand is that there is a constant increase, or there is a constant rigorous usage of mobile devices over laptops or desktops. So this increase in usage has eventually led to the increase in demand of mobile app development. So now business enterprises have started switching or developing applications for mobile devices rather than developing it on the desktop applications. Okay, so that increase in development, obviously we have to test the applications that are developed, right? So obviously the testing automation process also comes into role, and that in turn helps us or has eventually increased the job opportunities in the market. So that's how the increase in usage of mobile application has eventually led to the increase in job opportunities for mobile automation testing. Okay, so that's the reason we should learn mobile automation, because that's the trend that's happening in today's market. And then so let's have a look at current automation job trends. This is a pie chart that shows us about the percentage of job trends of manual and automation. You can see 60% of job trends are pertain to automation, whereas about 40% manual. And here you can see the three aspects that revolves around the automation job trends. First is the more focus on mobile testing. So, as I already told, mobile testing remains at the top of the test automation trends in today's market, because there is a shift from a desktop application usage to adaptation to mobile devices. So, this eventually led the mobile application testing to have a major impact in software testing industry. So that so software testing industry is mainly focusing on not only functional testing part, but also on performance, usability, compatibility, security testing as the major criteria. Okay, so now so the general prediction is that the increasing shift away from desktop and the laptop has eventually led the usage of mobile devices by users, and this has uh, and this has made the market to focus more on mobile testing. Okay, and then nowadays they are expecting for shorter delivery cycles, which means that high quality within a short time. So that's the main mantra. Nowadays we have rapid changes in technologies, so basically the app that a developer develops, they keep in mind to be deployed in maybe 2 to 3 weeks, and only then they start giving it for testing. For example, just consider a WhatsApp application. When you're installing the application, you only had the chatting part. You only had how to chat the application. Just a minute. Okay. uh, Consider I'm having a WhatsApp application, and when you tried to install the application, you only had the facility to chat with one another, and you had the facility to attach files and communicate. But later on, after few months you had the feature of calling, and then you had the another feature of status update and so on. So that's how each and every application gets gets improvised, and that's how it gets customers attracted to it. So how they focus is that they deliver the application first with basic necessities, and then new functionalities are added in short deliverables, so that customers get attracted to that particular application more often, and they use it more often than before. So that's the main mantra of shortening the delivery cycles. So with huge demand of your quality products, you should have a short span of testing, and that's the necessity you for automation testing to come into place. Okay. And then usage of open source tools. So business enterprises are nowadays focusing on using open source tools. The reason being, they have better performance and also they are more affordable. So these are the three major criteria that are considered in today's automation job trends. More focus on mobile testing. The reason being, people have shifted to mobile usage for more activities, and then shortening delivery cycles. So they are not sitting for a long time to develop an app. Rather, they develop an app in a short period, make it test it for within a short period and deliver it quickly, so that it goes to the customer as soon as possible, and then the next cycle goes on and so on. So this is possible only if you have the automation testing in place to test the application to be rolled out to production. And then usage of open source tools with which you will be testing the application within the budget of that enterprise. Okay, any questions till now? Okay, so let me proceed to the next topic. um, and the skills that we look for mobile testing jobs. Here I have listed the major criteria or the major skills people look for a good mobile tester. First is they should have an enhanced knowledge of mobile gadgets. Um, so you should the reason being, so the reason for having knowledge on mobile gadgets is that only if you know the smartphone or the tablet or whatever device that you are going to test on, then you can have an idea of how your application will work on it. So you should have a good understanding on the popular gadgets like iPhone, tablets, smartphones. So it might be smartphones like Sony Xperia, Samsung, etc. And then apart from the brands, you should also have knowledge of the operating systems like Linux, Windows, iOS, BlackBerry, and then different versions of each of the operating systems and so on. Okay. And then the second criteria is basic testing knowledge. So when I tell testing knowledge, it's about this testing life cycle in a project. How does testing come into phase in a particular project process? Okay, so that we should understand in order to know how testing happens for a project and how is it handled. So this is equally important when applying for mobile testing jobs. And then knowledge or hands-on experience in mobile testing tools and techniques. So basically for any mobile tester, it is necessary to be aware of different testing techniques as well as testing tools. So when I say testing tools, it is highly recommended to have at least one of the open source testing tools in hand, and also the testing techniques might be the different testing types, like how do we perform black box testing, an integration testing, unit testing, and so on. Okay, so these are the main criteria that they look for. And of course, Appium is one of the open source widely used testing tools for mobile automation. And then along with Appium, yes, we have other testing tools also like Ranorex, UI Automator, etc. So having a knowledge on one testing tool is a great advantage for mobile testing career, along with testing techniques. And then programming knowledge. So when I say programming knowledge, it doesn't mean that testers need to work like developers. Um, it's a significant part, but it's not relevant to developing an application. It's kind of understanding the functionality of the application, and only then you can get the main idea of what happens behind the screens. For example, just consider I have an application saying username and password. I have a login button. Okay, so my job is to test this particular application. It's a simple application. So so if I find a defect or if I find a bug, my job is not to just uh, report the bug and and file it on the tracker. But yes, I should have a root cause analysis wherein I will go back and see what caused the bug, what caused the defect, whether it was due to the environment, like because of the OS, or because of the compatibility issue, or because of the functionality issue. So I should have that knowledge of determining the root cause of a particular defect, and that comes only when you have the domain knowledge as well as the application knowledge, along with a little bit of programming knowledge. Okay, so programming knowledge is necessary. So this is not only necessary for determining the root cause analysis, but also for automation. So when you are developing a mobile automation framework, you develop it with any of the programming languages, be it either Java or PHP and so on. So it's necessary to have a deep understanding of any programming language in order to create a pure automation framework. Okay, so that's the reason programming knowledge is also considered as one of the main criteria skills. And then logical thinking, intellectuality, and creativity. Yeah, so in order to remain competitive in today's world, it's necessary to think logically and analytically, because only then you'll able to identify the errors easily, and you'll be able to determine the misbehavior in the applications. Okay, so it's not like just having a positive flow thinking of how the application will work, but thinking of all possible or all negative impacts of how the application might work on um, on a positive environment as well as on a negative environment. For example, when I'm opening an application, you should not only have the good um, the let me take it with an Amazon application. For example, I'm having a great Indian sale. They announced this big Indian sale only on few days, right? Maybe on 3 to 4 days. So I can't test the application on regular day wherein I don't have much population or much traffic on my website and determine that my application is working fine. So that I can't do. I should take into consideration the other factors as well, like traffic, on like traffic of how the application will behave uh, on congestion, and then how the application gets compatible with various devices while people are trying to access from tablets, smartphones. So those factors also you should take into consideration before you test. So you should have that kind of logical thinking, out of box thinking, by determining the application behavior and analyzing the different sides of the application. Okay, and then independent working. So now everyone is expecting to learn the skill of working independently. So this not only helps us to increase the confidence, but also will help us to sharpen the ability to work on the task. It might be a requirement task or a business analysis task or a testing job, or delivering it to the or delivering the output to the customer. So working independently helps you to take decisions or steps without any assistance. So that is what they're expecting in today's market. um, so these are the skills that is required for a good QA mobile tester. Any questions until now? Okay.
If there are any questions, you can put it on the chat and we can address it. Or else we will have a live Q&A. We'll have a Q&A done post the session also. But if there's any questions till whatever topics we have dealt till now, you can just put it on the chat and Sharmila would address it. Sharmila, I don't see any questions, so I think we can
Okay.
go ahead.
Sure. Okay. So until now, I just told you about how mobile testing jobs is in the market and what are the skills that they look for in today's trend. Now let us discuss on how mobile testing differs from desktop testing. Most of you might think that the same application, maybe Amazon, you might think that the same application will behave similar in a mobile device and in a laptop. Sorry, in a mobile device and in a desktop device, but it's not the case. Let me show you an example. So I'm opening Amazon.com here, and I'm opening the same on the mobile device. Okay, so instead of this, okay, I'll just come back with an example. I already had the example. I just come back with the example. So I was just about to tell you that desktops are usually targeted for specific platforms like Windows 8 or 9 and 10, but and Linux and Mac and so on. But these configurations don't change much often, right? uh, the configurations like Windows or Linux versions or Mac, they don't change much often. Maybe once in a while the versions get updated. But when we go for mobile devices, we have complexity of these platforms. You have versions released for each and every month. So maybe for the past few years, you can see you have lots of mobile devices released. Maybe you had 400 to 500 of mobile devices released in the past 5 years, Android devices released. So you have that complexity of testing it on various brands and on various platforms like iOS, Android, Windows, and that's the major difference on how do you test it on a desktop and on laptop. So you have new devices hitting the market very often, and you have to make sure that you test all possible combinations in that particular device. So it might be an iPhone with so and so version, Android with 5.1 version, 5.0 version, and so on. So you have lots of combinations to test when we go to mobile device, whereas in desktop it's not the headache. You only have specific configurations, which is very rigid, whereas here you have new versions coming on frequently, and you have to have your app compatible with all the versions. So the functional testing part will be a great challenge when we look for mobile testing. And then the responsive UI. Yeah, so this is a very important aspect when we compare mobile testing with desktop testing. So when you're doing a desktop testing, let me take the sorry let me take the application. So here what actions do we perform? It would be a simple click action or a mouse hover action or a type in action, right? But when we go for mobile device, our actions are not confined to those. We have lots of actions. Let me connect the mobile device and show you. Okay, so as the mobile device is connected, I'll just tell you the difference between how it works on a mobile device and on a laptop. Um, so in a mobile device, we are trying to make the interactions like as fluid as possible. Like we do a swipe action or a double click or scrolling. And nowadays we have Siri, which is a kind of voice recognition command. And I think in future we'll be having Siri combined with all the applications in order to interact with them. Instead of having the instead of having our fingers interacting with it, we might have voice commands also interacting with it. So the responsiveness of the application in the mobile device is very different when compared to your desktop. Um, and also our mobile devices are let, okay, let me just connect this. Okay, so the device is getting open. I just want to show you the different actions that we perform on the mobile device, like swiping over. Okay, swiping over, and then we perform a click action, right? And then a long press, you do a long press action, and then that gives you some options and so on. So you have lots of smart actions that your mobile is able to understand, like complex eye movement, and even gestures, fingerprints, and then directions, GPS and etc. So that, those are not those features are not confined in your desktop applications. You only have these features in your mobile device applications. So whatever application you develop, you should make sure that they are compatible to these kind of actions or gestures. Okay, so that's one main criteria. And then compatibility. Yeah, so as I told, we have various platforms when we come to mobile devices, like platforms like platforms like Windows, Android, and so on. And we also have different versions of the OS. Whereas when we come to our desktop applications, it's only a rigid platform wherein you have a constant operating system with a browser. So that version is not going to change for a long time. But when you compare your mobile devices, that is going to change over and over every time, and you have to make sure that your application is compatible with it. Okay, and the last one is the performance. This is the main criteria. Here we have lots of aspects to consider. Let me tell you. The first one is that consider an application that I'm testing on a mobile device. Okay, so let me open that mobile device. Um, Sorry. So when I'm testing an application on mobile device, I have other interruptions as well. You can see I have notifications. Sometimes I'll be getting a call in between when testing an application. So it's not a thing that I'll be just focusing on testing this particular application, but I'll definitely have the other interactions as well, like notifications, call, messages, and so on. But these interactions we don't get in our desktop application testing, right? So that we have to consider while developing an application, so that our application is able to handle all those interactions, how our application behaves to the interactions, and how does it come back to normal once it is interrupted in between. Okay, so as a tester, it is important to ensure that the application behaves properly when it is interrupted, and how it works according to the boundary defined. Okay, so this is one of the aspect on how your performance is affected. One is the interruptions in between, and the next is connectivity. So when you're using your application on your desktop, mainly it would be a local area network, that is a LAN or a wireless connectivity, right? But when you're using it on a mobile phone, it might be a 3G, it might be a 2G, or it might be a poor connection also, or suddenly it might be a shift from 2G or to 3G, or suddenly it might be a shift from 3G to wireless, and so on. So your application should be able to handle all kinds of weak signals and powerful signals, and how your application responds to those kind of connectivity. So apart from connectivity, there are also different carriers, how your application responds to different carriers, like Airtel and BSNL and so on. Okay, so that also affects the performance of the application. So connectivity is also one more criteria that will affect the performance of the application. But when you compare it to your desktop app, this is not a criteria at all. This is going to be a constant or stable environment always. But whereas in mobile devices, you will be using your mobile on your train, or when you are outside, where you don't have much network. So you have lots of situation changes when you use your application in a mobile device. So that is also an aspect that affects the performance of your application. And your application should be tested having these in mind. Okay, and one more thing is that storage. um, when you're testing an application on a desktop, your desktop, minimum you'll have 500 GB to maximum of 1 TB or even 2 TB of storage in your desktop application. But for your mobile device, the maximum storage, or the average storage is 8 to 16 GB. So that's how people usually have. Okay, so when your storage is limited, you should also make sure that your mobile device that you're installing is not going to have, or it's not going to occupy a major part in your mobile device. And even if it occupies, how does it behaves in such a environment, and how's the speed determined? Okay, so storage is also one more criteria that has to be taken into account when your mobile application is tested on your mobile device. And then traffic, as I told earlier, nowadays since people have shifted to using your applications on mobile devices more when compared to your desktop applications. For example, again, Amazon, wherein you have a wherein you have a great sale announced. So sometimes they intentionally tell that you have 10% or 20% discount if you purchase a particular item from a mobile device. So they are trying to promote their mobile application, and make people have the mobile application used for their shopping purpose. So that's how they are making the people intentionally use the mobile device for their application, right? So your traffic eventually gets more in your devices and compared to your desktop applications. So that aspect also should be considered when you're trying to test the application. um, how your performance is going to affect how your mobile device is going to respond along with your application opened. And uh, how the application responds even in offline situations. Okay, so, so this I just gave you an understanding of how your mobile device testing is different from desktop testing. It is completely different because of these criteria. You have the functionality different from one another. So for functionality, I told you I'll give you an example. Just let me give the example. So okay. So the you know that WhatsApp can be used from desktop application also, right? Um, I'm just opening a screenshot of using WhatsApp on desktop application. Okay, so this is how WhatsApp appears on a desktop application when you're using it on a laptop. Whereas when you use it on your mobile device, this is how you see it. So you can see the functionality and the UI is totally different when you're doing it on your desktop and on your mobile device. So the same is the case for other applications as well, like Twitter, Facebook, and so on. The functionality itself is going to differ. See, one example is that here I have some icon for contacts wherein I can look for contacts, wherein here I should search for contacts. Um, and I don't have all the contacts listed. I have another tab over here. So the functionality itself is totally different. Okay, so that's one more criteria of how your mobile app testing is different from desktop testing. Okay, so any other questions until now? Okay, so now let me tell you the challenges that we face when we're trying to test an application on a mobile device. So here I'll be telling you what makes your mobile device or what makes your mobile app testing easier, and what are the aspects that we should consider in order to make a better approach to testing a device. The first one is optimum selection of devices. So here, consider and developing an application. Once an application is developed, or before developing an application, first I should have an idea of what are the latest devices that I'll be considering for testing this application for. So understand, I have maybe in in the past few months I have 5 devices launched, new Android devices with one iOS device launched, and I have older versions also. Should I test the applications on all the latest versions as well as the older versions? So that should be a first question, because if you're going to test it on each and every version, then you're going to install your time in testing each and every yeah, testing in each and every device of your application. Okay, so that is not literally possible, like sitting and testing on each and every device. But you have an option wherein you can use emulators and simulators, right? Emulators and simulators means it is a virtual device of your mobile copy. So I can show you how an emulator will look like. um, I'll just open the emulator and keep, so in few minutes it will get opened. This is a tool called Motion, wherein we can create an emulator for a mobile device, which is a virtual copy of any configuration of the mobile device you would look for. Okay, instead of having a real device connected, you are going to create a virtual copy. Here I already have a configuration of a mobile device created, so I'll just launch it and show how it will look on an emulator. So this is one option wherein you don't have to have all the real devices in hand for testing. Rather, you can have emulators like this, wherein you create different configurations of OS with different underlying platforms, with which you'll test your application against it. So that is the first criteria. When you're trying to test your application on a mobile device, you should first think about what all devices you'll be considering for testing. If you're going to test it on all devices, then you should have all devices in hand or have your emulators or simulators ready. Okay. And when I told about emulators and simulators, we should also consider other criteria and capabilities and limitations of testing in an emulator. So, as I told earlier, we can't perform all interactions in an emulator. For example, as I showed you on a mobile device, so this is my mobile device. So here I have the ability to swipe across, long press, and so on. But when I open an emulator, let me open the emulator and show you. When the emulator is opened, you'll be able to see a keypad along with the screen. That's it. Okay, so you'll not have the features of you'll not have the advantage of interacting with the finger. So you only have to do a click or hover using the mouse, so that is limited. And also you'll not have you can't have a real time testing experience in emulator, because emulator is something that you're opening it on a system, right? So you can't imagine the interruptions that you'll get when you're testing an application. When I'm testing it on a mobile device, I know that I'll get so and so interruptions, and I can simulate the interruptions also, and I can test it. But on an emulator, I can't simulate an interruption and show you, or we can't predict the interruptions or the battery consumption of how much the application will affect the performance and its usage. Okay, and one more thing is that any lag that you see in your mobile device application can be can be exposed only when you do it in a real time. But when you're doing it in an emulator, it's not going to be the same. Emulators will not show you how the lag or how the application will lag when your mobile device memory is full, or how it will lag when your mobile device memory is to the threshold level, and so on. Okay, and then yes, the result is not going to be same for your mobile device and for your emulator. I'll just show you an example of an emulator. This emulator I'm just trying to open. Okay, so this is how the emulator will look like. You will have a mobile screen, a virtual screen of your mobile device along with the keypad. Okay, so basically here what you can do maximum is to use your keypads and the other action controls in order to perform the actions. So you only can do the actions on a mouse or a keyboard. You can't do it with your fingers. So that is, so you have limitations like that when you're trying to go for emulators and simulators. So yeah, you should have these criteria in mind before you try to test an app. You select your devices, and if you want to do a real time testing on all the mobile devices, you're not going to go for emulators and simulators also because they are having some limitations. Then one option is that you can go for cloud testing, wherein all the real time devices will be connected to a network using a cloud. So that is just a simple example of how the cloud testing works. What you do is you basically give a request to the cloud saying, I want to test on so and so devices. Maybe I want to test on Android 5.0, and then I want to test on iOS 8. I want to test on Android 5.3. I want to test on Samsung. I want to test on HTC. So different brands and different versions. You can give all the configuration requests to the server, and this server will distribute its configuration to different networks. That is, it will have a network, and it will distribute it to different clients, wherein each client will hold each configuration of this device, and it will run the automation or your testing on those devices. Okay, so that is one option of how you perform your application testing on various devices. Okay, so whenever an application is given for test, um, obviously we have to test it on devices. So the list of devices, and what are the requirements your product owner in the sense, the one who asks you to develop the application, what your product owner thinks of his application to its customers, and how your application is distributed for devices. So that's the first thing. The second one is connectivity. As I told, we already discussed about it. You should have in mind about the different connectivities like 2G, 3G, Wi-Fi, and the shift between the connectivities also, from 2G to 3G and from 3G to Wi-Fi. So there will be a shift between the strong network, poor network, and so on. So it's really a challenge to come up with such a simulation in real-time testing situation. You can't simulate a poor network and then a very strong network and then test it across to check whether your application is doing well on such network and so on. So that is also a challenge to do it on a mobile testing. But these have to be considered while testing. Maybe you can simulate to some extent and test it across. And one more thing is that you should also see how it responds when it is offline, or how it responds when we are not having any connectivity in between, suddenly if it is going off, and so on. Okay, and then storage limitations and power consumptions. Yeah, so here, as I told, you should know how much space your application occupies and how much total space your hard drive or SSD has. So if it's a mobile device, it would be 8 to 16 GB. And how does it react to these situations? So when you're trying to test it, you should also have your mobile device loaded with other applications as well running in background, so that you can see how your application works or reacts when you have other applications on your back on other applications in running in background, as well as when your mobile is full. So you should have the both your not only the easygoing way, you should also think about the uh, negative aspects of testing the application in other situations. So the power consumption should also be taken into consideration. How much power is consumed when your application is tested, how does their battery live for when your application is used for so much of time, and so on. Okay, and then maximizing automation. This is the main part, because mobile apps are installed and updated quite often and quite frequently, right? For example, just consider any application that you install, maybe WhatsApp or Twitter itself. for you'll see that you'll get updates quite often, maybe for 2 to 3 days, or once in a week you'll get updates saying your application has to be updated, your WhatsApp has to be updated, updates are pending. Okay, so we are getting updates quite often, not only updates in the application, but we also get updates in the underlying OS and the platform. Okay, so that also has to be updated frequently. So what we can do is that we can't test the application for each and every update. Rather, once a script is coded for testing the application, once a script is written, that script can be used for testing the application on any circumstance, be it a change in the application or a change in the OS. These tests should run fine whatever the situation is, even if the application is updated, or if the application OS or the OS of the device is updated, these tests should run fine. So that is possible only if you automate those tests and check for those criteria. So how it behaves for each upgrade, and how it acts for each and every installation. So if it crashes in between, you should be able to go back and restore it. So this is considered as a major criteria, reason being to have your application stable for the entire course. Okay, so basically when you're trying to test an application, first you should first you should see for the devices that are available, and then whatever devices your product owner has suggested for. And if you are not having those devices, you can go for other options like emulators and simulators, or you can go for cloud testing. And then the connectivity, you should ensure that you can kind of simulate the connectivities, like the shift between 2G and 3G, and usage of 4G, um, and then Wi-Fi, and then when you're having a poor network, and so on. So these simulations also should be taken into consideration when you're testing the application. And then storage limitations, how does it behave when your device is full, and when you have applications working in background, other applications working in background, even without your notice there will be applications working in background. And then how long does your application stand without interrupting your mobile device, without interrupting your actual mobile device working part. So your mobile device should not hang, it should be stable. So how long your application is able to withstand your mobile device with your mobile device. And then maximizing the operation automation in order to make sure that your application is always stable, no matter even if there is an update in the application or an update in the OS. When you have an automation code ready and run it on a daily basis, you'll be able to have an understanding, or you'll be able to have a focus that your application is stable always, even after the upgrade. And in case if there is any instability, then you will be notified because of your automation code. Because each and every day we can't have your application getting tested by a tester. Rather, if you have an automation code ready, then your application will be tested daily on a daily basis for each upgrade, and even on a high traffic and other situations as well. Okay, so that's about the challenges in mobile application testing. Any doubts until this? Okay. Um, Next, I would like to tell you about the types of mobile applications that we will be testing. When we are considering a mobile application, we have different types like native app, hybrid app, and web apps. So native app is something that we get it from Play Store. That is how I can tell it in a simple language. But to tell it in detail, it's actually a kind of installation that we do it on a mobile device. For example, just consider I'm going to Play Store. Okay, just consider I'm going to Play Store, and then I'm trying to install an application. I'm trying to install this application. So what basically happens is that you think that you click on this install button and then automatically the installation occurs, but that is not the case. Once you click on this install button, you will have a .apk file invoked, and that file is what installs it in the mobile device. So this file is equivalent to our .exe file in the Windows, right? So for whatever software we use in the Windows, you get a .exe file, and with this file only you'll be installing that particular software, right? Similarly, for this mobile device, you have APK file for Android device and IPA file for iOS device. So that is the difference between the extensions between Android and iOS. So once you click on install, this is what is happening. Your APK file is installing the application. Similarly, in your iOS, your IPA file is installing the application. So any application that is installed in a mobile device, any application that comes into your mobile device by installation is what you call as a native app. Okay, you can only get it from the Play Store or by installation. You can't get it from your browser. And an example is Skype, wherein you can only get the application from installation, or any gaming application. And then about hybrid application, an application that is available both on your mobile device, that is on your Play Store, as well as on your web app. For example, for Facebook, I can get it as an app separately and install it, as well as I can open it on a browser and access it, right? So I have a combination of sorry, I have a combination of using it from the Play Store as well, and also getting it from the web browser. So this kind of app is what we call as hybrid apps. And we have one more type of app, that is what we say as inbuilt apps. Inbuilt apps is something that is already available in that particular device. For example, this calendar app is an inbuilt app, calculator app, clock, and so on. These are inbuilt apps. It's not necessary to install inside the mobile device, rather it is already available in the device. So all these applications come under the mobile application types, and they are compatible to automation with Appium and Selenium. You can automate all the native apps, hybrid apps, and inbuilt apps as well. Okay, so before that, you should have an understanding of what a native app is, hybrid app is, and inbuilt app is. A native app is something that you install, or in simple words, is something that you get it from the Play Store only. Hybrid apps is something that you get it from the Play Store as well, and the from the browser. And inbuilt apps is something that is available already in the Android device. Okay, as I showed, like a calculator or a calendar app and so on. Okay, so that's about the different types of mobile applications. Any doubts until this? Okay. Next, about the agile process. I just wanted to discuss about agile process. The reason being, this is how software testing is carried out in any project nowadays. They use agile process for testing an application, wherein that is a faster approach, and we have a continuous delivery in this. Now let me tell you why are we using agile process, and before this, what process did we actually or what process were we actually using. Okay, so let me take you with let me just open a flow chart to explain it. Okay, so prior to agile process, what we followed was a waterfall model. So prior to agile process, what we followed was a waterfall model. um, were we able to see the screen? Because I think the screen was paused in between. Are you guys able to see the screen? Okay. um, so for agile process, how did it come into existence? So before agile process, we had a waterfall approach, wherein we had separate phases for each and every splits, or each and every project. For example, we had one phase had to get over, and only then we had to go to the next phase, and so on. So projects were split into phases. We didn't have any overlap and anything. First we had the requirement set, and then we had to design, and then we had to develop the code, and then test the product, and only then deliver the product. So this usually took a very long time. It usually took even few months to years in order to develop a project, because each and every phase is dependent on one another. Only if one phase is complete, they move on to the next phase, and so on. And once the requirements are all ready, then only they start developing the application and designing the product, and that's how the process took part. But once the application is ready and rolled out to production, by that time the client might ask for a change in requirement. He might tell that the trend has changed now, so I want a simple change in the product, can you make a change? So when that kind of request comes from the client, the project will not be able to handle, because it's a kind of a stepwise approach wherein the requirement was first read, and then the design was done, and then it was developed, and so on. So one change in requirement is going to change all the phases, and we have to develop the project again from the scratch, and the cost is also going to get higher. Okay, so here we didn't have a kind of flexible approach, or we didn't have a flexibility wherein we can change the requirements of the projects whenever we would like to, and introduce new enhancements inside the project. And that's why we this waterfall model was skipped over, and agile process came into place. The main shortcomings here is that I would say that any change that the client gives in between the project, or when the project is about to finish, or after the requirement is complete, they had to start again from the beginning. So that was the main concern. For example, the client says, I need a requirement to be added. um, Let me take this with an example. For example, just consider that the WhatsApp application that is developed. Consider that I have requirements like it should have a chat box, and then it should have contacts. That's it. For now I have only these two requirements, and then they're starting to develop the application. And then in the middle the client says, no, I'm going to add a call also, can you add it now? But what happens is that they already started developing the code, and they're not in a phase to add it, because they have the design ready, they have designed how the application should look like, they have the UI ready, etc. They're developing the code. The change of adding this new status call will create a great impact inside the entire application. So what will happen is that from the beginning, from the design, they will start to change. So they will change the design again from the start, like change how it should look for the calls, for the status, for the text, and so on, and then deploy it again, develop it again, and test the project. So this was a long process. So any change made was was going to be expensive. They had to start from the requirements to be corrected along the phases. Okay, so that was one of the major drawback. And one more thing is that the responsibility was fragmented, so no one took end to end responsibility. Everyone, people who were in requirement told that they are responsible only for this, and the design team was responsible for design. So no one took end to end responsibility, everyone focused only on their phases. And communication was less, because each person restricted to that phase itself. And because of this they had low levels of motivation, because they didn't have much exposure. So this team will know only about requirement, they'll not know what's happening in the design. Similarly, the design team will not know what's happening in the deployment team, what's happening in the testing team, and so on. So their knowledge is confined, and they don't have much exposure to what's happening in the entire project itself. So that's how the waterfall model or approach was going on. Okay, so to bring out a change in this process, agile process was introduced, wherein I would tell that agile is a time boxed iterative approach. um, let me open the slide. Okay, so here what we do basically is that we deliver the products continuously. So it's not a one time delivery, we deliver a product on a continuous basis. So how does this happen? We break the products into smaller units. For example, I have 100 requirements for this products. So what I'll do basically is that to develop a product, I have 100 requirements, but to have it in the market soon, I'll prioritize the requirements. The first 10 requirements I'll take into consideration. I will fix priority and take the first 10, develop the application, push to the market to the users. Now my application is in the market, yes, with less features, but it is already in the market with its main functionalities. And then in the next cycle, what I'll do, I'll push the next 10, and then in the next cycle I'll push the next 10. So that's how it happens. So this duration of adding the new features is mostly 3 to 4 weeks. Okay, 3 to 4 weeks they develop all the features that they want to push into the next release and so on. So that's how agile process is um, focused on. So here, if you want to add a new requirement, yes, you can add it in the next sprint, which is going to come not very late, but sooner, in 2 to 3 weeks, or a maximum of 4 weeks. So that's how the requirement adding was also very easier, and this satisfied the customer with early and continuous delivery. Again, let me take this with an example. um, Sorry, I have a diagram to just illustrate how it works. Okay. Okay. I'm going to take this with again the WhatsApp example itself. Let me open the application side by side. Okay. So now consider that how did WhatsApp came into play. First, we had only the chat, and we had the contacts, right? So when WhatsApp was first launched, they only had these two requirements in mind, or maybe they had the other requirements also. They had calls, status also in mind, but they didn't launch them. They first launched these two functionalities with the application, right? So first the requirements are defined, all the requirements are defined, and from those requirements they fix priority and select the top requirements, and then they start developing the product. Because having all the requirements in mind and developing is going to take a long process, rather going for only the major criteria that that speaks for the application is far enough, and that is going to reach the users more quickly. So you start designing the product and build the code, and then test it and put it into production. Yes, now WhatsApp is ready with some chat and contacts. Okay. So now after few days we got calls also available, right? So that was a push from the next cycle of sprint. So that was a feature that was added in the next 3 to 4 weeks. That is what I call it as sprint. Okay. And that was added to the already built application, and it was integrated with the application, and again the application was tested and pushed out to production, and users were able to use it. And then when uh, when Facebook bought WhatsApp, we had even more and more features getting added. So there were not only requirements that was already planned, but also we had new requirements coming in. We had new requirements also coming in. So those were also taken into consideration, like status, and you have that kind of smileys getting added. Now we can see lots of different smileys getting added, and even the GIF images and so on, right? So these are the new features that got added in each and every sprint. So they didn't give entire release for this application, rather they first gave the priority functionalities to the user, and then they saw how user starts interacting with it, and how user gets the interest, and that's how they introduce the other functionalities, so in order to attract users. So this is how agile process works, wherein you have continuous delivery in your product. You don't have stagnant in your product at all. You deliver your product continuously with more and more updates. So in short, I can tell it as agile will always have a working version of your code or product. Okay, so that was the main uh, key or main idea behind the agile process. Okay. So that's the reason people started to switch to agile methodology. wherein your customers also get satisfied, you welcome new requirements, and you deliver your products more frequently within few weeks and months. And yes, in agile process, one more main criteria, or one more main significant feature is that you are able to interact with the product owner. Even the developers and the testers are able to interact with the product owner whenever a application, whenever a sprint is about to start. When I say sprint, it is a new feature is about to added, or few features are going to get added. The product owner in the sense, a person who tells us to develop the app. For example, I am the product owner. Um, Maybe I tell Varkasa to develop a mobile app. So I become the product owner. So the product owner directly interacts with the developers as well as the testers. He gets their opinions, he gets their challenges, he understands them, and he gives a timeline. Okay, so there is no in-phase communication. You have a whole communication wherein everyone is able to interact, including the product owner and the developer and the manager and the tester to the trainee and so on. So this is not a managerial approach. It is a kind of team approach wherein everyone is involved in the project and everyone knows what's happening in the project. And yes, they develop knowledge. They in turn develop knowledge as well. So so that that cause that gets sorry that gives them more motivation, and they develop the projects in a sustainable constant pace. Okay, so that's how an agile process is designed. You have incremental or iteratable features getting pushed to your production for each and every sprint, that is for each and every cycle. So here you have different agile methodologies like scrum, extending programming. Let me type it. So you have scrum, and then extreme program, and then feature driven development, dynamic system development method. So these are different methodologies of following agile process. And this is the process that today's market is sticking on for developing any application in the in the market, and also testing it. Of course, the agile process is followed. And that's much about the agile process. Any doubts about agile, and why are we using it, how does it work and all? Okay, so now I'll just give you an overview of the topics that we'll be covering for this entire session. Okay, so here I have split the topics into different chapters or modules. First will be introduction to Appium and mobile automation testing. So here it is just an introductory session wherein we'll discuss about Appium. What is it? What are its features? How does it work? The architecture, in the sense it has a client server architecture. So we will see how client server architecture helps us in achieving automation, and how it is combined with Selenium in order to test it on real time mobile device. And then basics of Java. I'm discussing on Java. The reason is, before we are trying to write an automation code, or before we try to create a framework, we should know little bit of programming language, and only then we can jump into that. So I'll be discussing basics of Java, wherein we'll be seeing what a class, object, what are interfaces, other concepts of Java like collections and oops. So these will be discussed with real time examples. And then installation of Appium. So when we talk about Appium, actually the installation is quite tricky. It is a long process, and we have to analyze and know what softwares and dependencies are necessary in order to have Appium up or running in a machine. So I'll be discussing about the basic installation, whatever packages and files or softwares are necessary in order to have Appium configured in your system. And then configuration of mobile device with the system. So once your Appium is installed, next we are going to run our applications on your mobile device, which means we are going to automate applications in the mobile device, whatever application it is. Okay, we are going to automate on the mobile device only. So we have to connect the mobile device with the system and make sure if the system is able to configure or recognize the mobile device. So those configurations also we'll be discussing. And then UI Automator Viewer on mobile device and emulator. So this is a tool that helps us to recognize elements on the mobile device. When I say elements, that means, for example, just consider I'm opening WhatsApp application itself, and or okay, Yahoo Mail application. Okay, and here maybe I want to click on this element and I want to check whether my account email ID is getting displayed in the top left corner. So maybe consider that is one of the test case. Then my first criteria is, or my first step is, I need to click on an element or I need to open the application. So I need to interact with some or the other element and only then perform an operation. So that interaction is possible only if I identify that element. So this identification process wherein you interact with certain elements. So this identification process is done using a tool saying UI Automator Viewer in mobile device. So that is what I mentioned here. We'll see how to interact and recognize elements on your mobile apps using UI Automator Viewer. And we have different recognition techniques like XPath, class name, and ID. So we'll also see how to create an XPath, how do we get a class name, different strategies of recognizing a element, and automate native app and on a mobile, sorry, on an Android device. So I'll select any native app and then I'll show you how to automate it on the mobile device. Maybe I'll go for Amazon or Walmart, whatever native app I will just get. I'll I'll get it installed in the mobile device, and then we'll see from the scratch how to connect it, how to recognize it, how to interact with the elements inside it, and automate it. So uh, it would be an entire live session wherein I'll show from installation to scripting and execution. Okay, and then automate web app on Android Chrome browser. So this is previously I talked about native app, and chapter 7 is about web app, wherein we'll see how to automate on Chrome browsers and different browsers available like this web app browser and Chrome browser and so on. How can we directly open it on this browser and automate it? So that also we'll be selecting an application and we'll be automating it with live example. And then TestNG and Maven. So TestNG is a framework and Maven is a build tool. We'll see how TestNG helps us to optimize our automation code even more in a better way, and how Maven helps us in building or adding the dependencies for the project. So this you'll understand when I show you or when we use it in a project about TestNG and framework and Maven. And then creation of frameworks. Here it's about keyword driven and hybrid driven framework. So whenever we are trying to create an automation code, it's always better to go for creating a framework first and then we script our code. Basically, when we create a framework, that would be our first step. Once a framework is created, it's not necessary to have your script or it's not necessary to have your script checked in or main or checked in or you you don't have to add features for each and every functionality that's getting added, because once a framework you are creating it, you'll have the basic keywords already specified or optimized here in keyword or hybrid. You'll optimize it in such a way that for any application this framework will work for all kinds of testing. So that's how we'll be handling a keyword driven framework, wherein once it is created, it can be used for testing any mobile application. Okay, be it a Walmart application or a WhatsApp application or anything. So we will add all the actions like from swipe to click and everything. We will design it in the framework and we'll see how it is carried out. So this also will be I'll be explaining it with a live example. And then creation of mobile automation framework with page object model. So page object model is a design pattern This is used integrated with framework. The reason being, it gives us a more readable format and a kind of optimized version of using the automated script. So we'll see how it helps us have a more readable script and also helps us to maintain the script more easily. So we will discuss about this design pattern also. And then Expresso for automated testing framework. This is a framework that we use for Android devices. We'll see how Expresso can be used with the normal testing framework, and then how testing is carried out in the cloud. So as I told, when we'll be as far as I can do is that we'll be showing, or I'll be illustrating testing in an Android device. So at one point of instance, I can just tell you how it occurs in one Android device. But when we are developing an application, sorry, we have to test across different Android devices with different versions, right? So for that, I can't connect each and every device and show you, or we can't test how it acts in each and every device by connecting it to the system or by testing it and then determining the results. Rather, we go for the cloud, wherein your cloud network will have all the devices inside it, all the devices, all the versions of your devices, different versions, different configurations will be there, and whatever configuration you would like to do testing on, that can be performed on the cloud. So we'll see how we can distribute our test or automation scripts in cloud and execute it. Okay, so that's much about the entire course. So it's a kind of in detail course for mobile automation testing. We're starting from Appium. Then we are also talking about Java. We'll be discussing about Selenium commands as we try to create the project and frameworks, and about the design pattern as well. And then how we distribute a test on different devices using cloud. Yeah, that's much about today's orientation session. Any other doubts? Yes. Hello. Please post your questions if you have any.
Hi Sharmila, this is Ashna from iTeLearn. Can you see the questions that they have added? There are a few questions. If you can start addressing them.
Oh.
Can you see the questions on the chat?
No, I don't have the questions in the chat.
Okay.
Just a minute. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think you can go from the above, from the first question. There were a few questions, like the first question asked by Parmesh Gauni, more complex. Okay, no, it was just not. Okay, I think Lavanya Yatala asked a question. What is the tool you use to connect to the mobile? And then there are many other questions. What does you mean by long press? By Ramesh, and so on. So can you see the questions?
Yeah, just a minute.
Yeah. So I would request you, Sharmila, to open a Word document.
Okay.
And start posting or keep adding these questions there and then respond to it one by one.
Okay.
Or a notepad also is good. Yeah. You can just copy paste the question from there, put it here, and then start addressing.
Okay, so didn't get Windows, Mac, Linux doesn't change. Are we talking about web app or desktop app? Web app versions change frequently, I guess. Okay, so this question was asked by Amarnath. I think he has left. So this I was just telling that mobile devices have different versions that are getting deployed more frequently when compared to your desktop applications. So your desktop configuration doesn't change quite often. That it's just quite stable. Once you install your Windows for a particular version, you don't change it quite often. Whereas when you go for your mobile devices, uh, it automatically has an auto update of your underlying OS as well as your application. And so that's the reason I told that we have we have to focus on uh, testing it on different versions of mobile devices, because not only the upgrade but also you are getting new versions available to the market, so your mobile device should be compatible to the new versions as well. So that's the reason I told you that mobile testing is a bit complex when compared to desktop testing, because you have lots of um, you have lots of new versions and new OS coming out into the market more frequently when compared to your desktop configurations. Okay, and then more complex in mobile device than laptop or desktop device. Parameshwar. Okay, so you have asked that whether it is more complex in mobile device testing or on a desktop device. Yeah, so desktop device, it's very simple, because you just have to open your browser, and then you type in the URL, and then you do your testing. You're not going to have any interaction in between, and you'll go with the flow, just with how you perform your normal testing. But in a mobile device, as I told you, you will have connectivity issues, because you're not going to test it on a because the user is not going to use your application on a single seat. He'll be roaming around in different places, and your application also should respond promptly to that. So that is one challenge, as I told. Another one is um, how your traffic how your mobile device traffic depends on the user is accessing. For example, on a great Indian day sale, as I told, your traffic will be more on mobile devices when compared to your uh, the same application on your web browser. The reason being, people opt for mobile devices obviously, and your traffic gets more, so that also should be taken into consideration, so it becomes complex. And then as I told, you have different versions available, so you have to take those into consideration. And also the connectivity and the responsiveness of the device, like how it responses to different interactions, like your voice commands, or it might be an action, a keystroke action, or even nowadays it's trying to capture the face recognition and so on. So there are lots of smart recognition techniques that the mobile apps are bringing into the market. So testing the same application on the laptop and on the mobile device is definitely different, and it is going to be complex on testing on a mobile device. um Param, Paramesh, did I answer your question? Is that fine? Okay. And then Lavanya has asked, what is the tool you use to connect to the mobile? Yeah. Okay. So Lavanya, I basically used a kind of remote connection in order to show you how my device will react. Okay, this is a kind of remote connection. So I use a software called Visor. You have other softwares available, free trial versions of TeamViewer, and yeah, you have PDA Net Plus also, I think. So I used Visor in order to connect. You can use TeamViewer and other devices. This is just a kind of remote connection. That's it. I can access it from my system, and I can also view it from my system. Just to show you how my mobile device looks like, and how show you examples on how WhatsApp will work for for different topics that I was discussing. Okay, so this is just to show a mobile. Sorry, this is just to show a view of my mobile device, but this is not a connection that we will be using for automating, because your mobile device uh, will not be recognized by this remote connection while we are trying to automate. So for that reason only, we have to use Appium in order to connect with your mobile device, and then that Appium server will talk to your client, that is your real-time device. So this we will understand this architecture when we go into in detail topic of Appium introduction. Okay, so that's about the tool that I used. And why the functional application functionality is different, can you please clarify? Okay, now consider you're trying to open Twitter on your desktop, that is on your browser, Chrome browser, and you try to open Twitter on your mobile device as well. You will see lots of difference in the functionality that is placed. Functionality in the sense, it's not about the entire or adverse difference, but definitely there are minimal changes in functionality between your mobile device application and in the same application in your Chrome browser in your desktop. Okay, so that's what I gave you an example of WhatsApp application wherein I showed you how it appears on your desktop application and how it appears on your mobile device here. Okay, so that's what I was trying to tell you, how it behaves on your mobile device and how it behaves on your desktop application. Okay, so the functionality wise, the change is not going to be a maximum change, but there are minimal changes when compared to the application in both the devices. And then the next question is, what does mean by long press? Okay, long press means when you're trying to do action on your mobile device. For example, see, I'm just giving a long press and you can see that I'm getting various options to clear it off or to change its place and so on. So this is what I meant by long press activity. Okay, so these kinds of interactions like swiping, long press, and you have lots of other interactions as well, as I told, like face recognition, and even eye movement capturing, and even nowadays we have a camera application that is able to capture just with your voice command, saying take a picture, something like that, right? So these and all are extra features added in your mobile device only, wherein it makes your testing even more complicated. And as people do the manual testing in mobile application, yeah, manual testing is also part of mobile device testing, but the thing is, um, it's not, as I told you, currently the trend is they look for automation to be in focus, because you have your application getting updated each and every for each and every week almost. You have new feature getting added, so you can't have a manual tester assigned for that particular testing, and you can't tell him to test on a regular basis, test this application again and again to make sure that the application is not breaking. Even he will get frustrated because it's a monotonous job, right? So in order to reduce that, yes, automation is definitely needed, but in some cases, in some extreme cases wherein we can't automate, we have to go for manual. So that is only for one or two test cases wherein automation is not in scope, but manual is necessary. But it's not that manual is the only thing that should be focused for testing an application. Automation is the main focus. Manual comes only if you have no other option to test the application. Okay, and then mm, this is not the first session of Appium. This is just an introductory class, kind of an orientation session wherein I gave you an insight of what mobile application testing is, why do we need to learn about this, because of the trending jobs in today's market, and how I showed you a survey of how it goes on in today's market and so on, and about the cycle of how mobile testing comes into place in a project life cycle. Can you please explain more on the features? Yes, we'll be explaining and focusing on the features. As I showed you regarding the course contents, we'll be covering all the features in the upcoming class. Can you give details of Scrum? Yeah, Kajorik, that as I told, agile process, we have different methodologies like Scrum and all. So Scrum is a part of an agile process, wherein maybe I'll tell you what happens in a Scrum. Um, so Okay, so I told that this is how the workflow of your agile process is designed. So what happens is that the product owner, so the product owner will be someone who tells us to develop the app. That is what we call as that person is what we call as the product owner. So the product owner first will have 100 requirements in mind, and he'll have all the fancies and wishes that he would like to have the app to be developed for. Okay, but for now what he'll tell is that for now just have the 10 requirements developed, and then push to production, develop it and push to production so that users can start using it. So that's the first step that he'll do, and the remaining 90 requirements he'll have it in backlog, and these requirements will be filled in for each and every cycle, and it will be pushed to production. So that is how it works out in a scrum. Okay, and along with black backlog, not only the requirements that he had in his mind, maybe if he's having a new requirement coming up, if he's thinking of another new requirement, he can add those requirements as well to the cycle, and he can continue the process of deploying it or pushing it to the production available to the user. Okay, um, and then please explain terminologies of agile. For now, I just gave you a brief. I just gave you a high level understanding of how the agile process goes and how it is carried out in a project. So, if you want to have in detail explanation terminologies like Scrum Master, Sprint, and then they call it as the stories and all. If you want to discuss about the terminologies, I can add it in the next session. The user stories, the backlogs, uh, the developers, the product owners, the stakeholders, and then how the defects are integrated with the user stories, and how the points are allocated. So those are part of the project life cycle. So maybe I can include it in another session. That will be a it will be in detail explanation. um, Testing in manual is different from automation in mobile application. Testing in manual is different from automation in mobile application. Okay, I guess that this question is whether you're asking if automation and manual testing different from mobile application. Okay, yeah. So when you test it manually, as I told, you have to test the same feature again and again to make sure that your mobile to make sure that your application is stable for a longer time. For example, if you push your application to production, say for WhatsApp itself, it's rolled out to production, and the company will not have a person assigned to testing the application on a daily basis to make sure that all the functionalities are working properly. Rather, they'll just put a automation code and have it run on a daily basis on different devices, so that that automation code will give them a report saying the application is fine. So that's how they do it. So manual testing, they don't do it on a daily basis. They do it only when it is required, when a new feature is added, or when automation testing is not possible in some cases, or when defect fixes are coming up. When a new defect is introduced and when a fix is coming up, then they go test it manually. Okay. um, Frameworks and test cases, it would be helpful to work out in assess. Okay, frameworks and test cases. So about the frameworks and test cases, I will show it to you in live how to create it, and with examples. So I will have maybe 5 to 6 test cases for an application, and I will show you how to develop it along with creating a framework. So you can do it side by side in your system as well. Does the mobile application testing include iPads and other gadgets as well? As I told, since we can't include everything, we'll be focusing on the cloud testing, wherein we can distribute our application over different devices and we can see how it runs on various devices. So that part will cover how it will run on iPad and all, because I don't have a device to. So for illustration, I'll be kind of focusing on Android application, and then at the end I'll show you how it runs on various devices by distributing it on the cloud. And for iPad or for iPhone, we can either use a simulator and show you, but on a real-time device, I can't connect a real-time device, but I can create a simulator or an emulator and show you how it works on iPad or iPhone. Can we test any game? Can we test any game application in automation? Yes, it is possible to test any game application in automation. Why in gaming, one drawback is that you can't interact with elements directly, because everything will be flash based there. Mostly everything will be flash based, wherein you'll not have any proper recognition technique. So that will be using um, another dependency of a tool called CQLi, which helps us to capture the image of that particular element, and we'll be using image recognition technique to identify the element and work on it. So likewise, we can automate any game inside the flash applications. Okay. Is it any difference between mobile app testing and mobile testing? Difference between mobile app testing and mobile testing. Okay. So mobile testing, in the sense, it's testing the device configurations, basically the configurations of the device, the battery consumption, the power consumption when most of the devices are installed. So that is what they tell about mobile testing. Mobile application testing is uh, confined to the application that we test on, but yes, considering the other features also in mind. But mobile testing is not considering the application in mind. Okay. Is if an application is tested for compatibility with if an application is tested for compatibility with available OS and browsers and delivered for users, what happens if a new browser is introduced in the market? Will the end user be able to access that in his mobile device? Okay, so just consider, for example, that you're telling that you're having a Chrome browser inside your mobile device and you're testing it on that browser. And when a new version of Chrome browser comes, you are asking whether you're able to test it on that mobile device. Okay, so that's what an application that you develop should be compatible, keeping in mind even the new version should that is how the developer should develop the application. Okay, and once it is developed, testers will test it across, and if any new versions are coming into the market, those versions will also be added to the list of the configuration executable devices. So I told that they will be distributing the devices on the cloud and executing it, right? So in that cloud, they will add this new version of the device also and make the device test in order to ensure that it is stable on the new version as well. Okay. Mobile app testing foundation for who is beginner for this. Are there any slides or demo on how to configure Appium with real-time device? Yeah, as I told, or as I showed you in the course contents, we'll be discussing on how to configure real-time device with the system and with the Appium, and how to install Appium. So these all will be covered in the course contents when we are discussing. When we are starting with the course, we'll cover these topics. Yeah, that's about the questions, Ashna. I don't think the other are just general questions asking about the timings and.
Yes, Sharmila, I would clarify on that. Team, this was the orientation session. It was a free session, and again we have two more demo sessions that are again day 1 and day 2, which is scheduled for 26th of April and 30th of April at the same time, 8 a.m. Pacific. So we do have two more sessions on, that is 26th and 30th of April at 8 a.m. Pacific, and that would be 27th. If no, that will be 26th and 30th April in India also, but at 8:30 p.m. IST. Okay, it will be 8:30 p.m. IST for India members, and post which we will have the paid training starting. And the paid training will be Monday to Friday, each day 60 to 90 minutes of session, and the exact date and the schedule will be sent to you all on your email IDs. Any other questions that you'll have? And this video would be uploaded on our YouTube channel and even on the website. You can just go to www.iTeLearn.com/webinars and access the videos. This video would be uploaded max in next 6 to 10 hours, and you can go and check the video there. You can repeat it and watch it again as needed. Team, all the details about the training fees and all are available on the page. I would request you to go there and check on it. I see two people have raised their hands. So do you have any questions? Do you want me to unmute you? If yes, please let me know, team. I can unmute you and you can ask your questions. Please respond through chat and confirm if you want me to unmute you. It's Revati and Sudha. Revati and Sudha, do you want me to unmute you because I see your hand raised? Okay. Sudha, do you want me to unmute you because I see your hand raised? If no, then we can end the session. And team, I am sharing a link on chat on which you can go and check the detailed course content and the other details about the course. Okay, I see a hand raised again. It's by Kajori. So Kajori, do you want me to unmute you? You have a question for Sharmila? Okay. So okay, then I'm not really sure why the hand is raised. Please, you can put it down. Okay, so team, we are good for now. We will end the session. Thank you, Sharmila. Thanks for joining in. And thank you everyone for joining in. Hope to see you again on 26th of April and 30th of April for the day 1 and day 2 session at 8 a.m. Pacific again. Thank you, team. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hello.
Yes, Sharmila. I think Kajori has a question. So can you please respond to it?
Yeah. So is it necessary to test any application in old and so any application that a developer develops or a product owner asks the developer to develop, he'll give a list of the users that he targets for. So might be the users that he'd be targeting for might be iPhone users who will be using the application, or it might be Android users. So he'll tell the developer what kind of application he has to develop to be compatible with the latest versions, or should it be compatible with iPhone or Android. So keeping those in mind, the application will be developed and tested across. So it's not a general criteria to test across all the available versions of Android and all the available versions of all the devices. So basic requirements will be taken into consideration and developed, and those requirements will be again used for testing purpose also. So they'll have an idea of what audience they'll be reaching to for an application that is developed, right? So using that strategy, they will be testing it on various devices and versions of Android. So if they are asking it to test it on old Android versions also, even our users are going to have Jelly Bean and KitKat. Users are also going to use the application. If my product owner is telling that yes, even old users are going to, or users having old Android devices are going to use the application, yes, they'll ask the testing team to focus on testing those versions as well. So that is how it goes. Okay. Okay.
There is a question from Yogesh as well.
Okay. Map.
CMAP Mobile App Testing Foundation level certification is useful for who? Is beginner in automation testing.
CMAP Mobile App Testing Foundation level certification. Okay. I'm sorry. I don't have idea about the certification. Maybe I'll check and let you know.
Sure, Shamila, we can address this question in the next session. You
Okay.
probably can just note it down. So, Yogesh, for now, we do not have an answer for it, but then we'll definitely come back on this in the next session or through an email. Thank you, team, and thanks everyone for joining in. Thank you.
Thank you.